Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Sitting on the beach under an umbrella turned out to be far more therapeutic than I had ever imagined. The plane landed safely, and after checking into my resort hotel, I headed straight to the beach. Yesterday evening, I returned to my bungalow, had dinner with a decent amount of alcohol, and then went to bed. This morning, I drank coffee, had a light breakfast with muffins, and then came back to the beach. Some of my friends always posted photos on Facebook of sun loungers near azure waters and white sandy beaches. I used to look at them and think, yeah, that would be nice. But sitting here now, I realized that no photographs could convey the peace I felt. There was a gentle warm breeze, and the air temperature was a perfect 28 degrees Celsius. I chose a spot on a semi-private beach, so the people on the public part were much farther away. In the distance, I could see small dots of people, but I knew they wouldn't disturb my peace. The waves were small but constant. Occasionally one wave would be a little higher, breaking beautifully with a white plume of spray, making a wonderful noise. The sand was clean, and the water was as clear as glass. I could stare at it for hours, thinking almost nothing but appreciating the beauty in front of me. In the distance, several clouds hung over the water, and behind the beach house stood dozens of large, majestic palm trees surrounded by shrubs resembling rhododendrons of the northwest, but much larger. I saw pink, purple, white, and even red flowers on these plants. There was color everywhere, which seemed to be the main theme of the place. Of course, all good things must come to an end. While I was sitting, my phone vibrated. I looked at it and saw a message from Maddie. "I love and miss you, Dad. Please call. Hope to see you soon. Kisses, Maddie." This simple message brought tears to my eyes. I would do anything for my little girl, but the only thing she wanted was something I couldn't give her, her perfect family back. Unfortunately, she wasn't alone in this. I also wanted to go back to what we had, but we had already gone too far, and we couldn't go back. I answered her, "Love you too, baby. I'm just trying to relax here. They'll call you in the evening, I promise. I love you more." The only thing I had to keep in mind was the time difference. She was on the East Coast, and I was in Hawaii, with at least a 6 to 7 hour difference between us. This would need to be clarified. With that message, my perfect day at the beach was put on pause. I stood up and headed back to the bungalow. For the first time in a long time, I had nothing to do, no one expecting me to act, no one depending on me. I had no urgent matters, meetings, or calls. The feeling was both extremely liberating and slightly disorienting. I wasn't going to try too hard to stay busy. I decided I would adopt the philosophy of my favorite cartoon characters, Hakuna Matata. I was once told that this meant no worries. Thank you, Timon and Pumbaa, for letting me steal your expression. I chuckled to myself at my own joke. I made myself a sandwich and grabbed some fruit salad from what I found in the refrigerator. This was the best vacation of my life. Unfortunately, the thought that Caitlin was supposed to be here ruined my mood a little. Just thinking about it reminded me of what could have been. For almost the whole day, I had managed to keep her and our situation out of my mind. My thoughts were clouded, but they began to clear up with renewed energy. Before my day completely deteriorated, I turned to the bar, fully stocked and ready to offer some respite. It seemed like heaven. You should take advantage of everything that's available to you. We should probably patent this idea. It might make a nice Hallmark card. Anyway, I found what I was looking for and grabbed the bottle. I poured a couple of shots into a large glass, added fruit juice from an unlabeled bottle, and stirred. It smelled like pineapple, but regardless, it tasted amazing. I made a mental note to find out what kind of juice it was so I could buy more later. I inserted the straw, grabbed my lunch, and headed back to the beach to sit in the lounge chair. Sitting there, I raised my glass to the blue sky, to the memory of my marriage. I lowered the glass and took a good sip. The sky didn't answer my toast, but it seemed to understand. Maybe I was starting to lose it, but somehow, I decided that I would be okay. I calmly finished my lunch. Afterward, I decided it was time to do something productive, even if only for a few minutes. I needed to make a couple of calls to close the remaining loose ends. First, I had to contact Sandra and Tony to sort out the legal issues back home. Additionally, there was the question of where to live. The first call I made was to Tony, hoping he was still in the office. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Tony here. Is that you, James?" "Yeah, it's me. So, is there any news on my situation?" "I guess so. I filed the petition to remove him from the partnership." The judge temporarily suspended the trial because Cyrus has only been charged, not yet sentenced. Also, the feds requested copies of all business records because of Cyrus' other activities. The good news is, Cyrus is a fugitive. He was supposed to appear at the hearing today, but didn't show up. That's great for your business and future sales. That's a relief. I still have an interested buyer from the West Coast, but I need to deal with the Cyrus case first. You should get the power of attorney in the mail today, as we discussed. Okay, he'll process it and send it back as soon as I get it. As for the deal and Cyrus, keep me posted. We hung up quickly, not wasting time with goodbyes. So this idiot jumped bail, huh? What's next? I muttered to myself. I couldn't believe it. How did I not see his flaws before I reached out to him for business? They were always there, in plain sight, but it was as if I had chosen to ignore them. Another lesson learned, I suppose. I took another sip of my cocktail, and just before I could dial the number, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. The name flashed on the screen, Kurt Simpson. I wondered what he needed. Hello, this is James. Mr. Holmes, this is Kurt Simpson. We were watching your wife's house last night, and I wanted to let you know something. Speak, I said, intrigued. I was standing about 2 houses away from yours when, around 9 p.m., a dark gray BMW pulled up to your house. I took photos, and I'm pretty sure it was your partner, Cyrus Black. He went to the door and was let in without any hesitation. I froze for a moment, processing his words. I couldn't say anything. All I could think about was that the man was back, probably for another fix. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't I noticed it sooner? I thought we were happy, but now this seemed to explain a lot about my wife's behavior from the start. Go on, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, helped by the rum in my glass. I took another sip as I listened. I watched the house all night, and around 7 o'clock in the morning, he came out and left. I followed him for a bit and noticed him staying at a small motel about 2 miles away. As soon as he checked in, I left. Thank you, Kurt. You have no idea how much you've helped me. You can stop following her now, but I have a question. Were you able to get any photos or evidence from last night? This might be useful for my lawyer. Also, could you provide his location to the police? I heard he jumped bail and is wanted. I couldn't help but grin at the thought. How stupid was it to run and not even try to hide properly? It served him right. Yes, I took a few pictures. I didn't think you'd want to know or see them, but I did manage to get a clear shot of them together through the window. They'll send them to your lawyer. As for notifying the police, don't worry, I will. There's one more thing. We found out that Cyrus was collaborating with a certain Christopher Hood, a government employee. The feds are keeping everything under strict control, but it looks like this is just another case of corruption. Damn, was that FEMA agent also working with Cyrus? Things just keep getting more complicated. I can already imagine myself as Alice, falling down a bottomless rabbit hole. Got it. Thanks for the update, Kurt. My pleasure, James. I'm truly sorry this happened. I hate it when good people suffer. One of the reasons I do this business is to bring at least a little justice into people's lives. Thank you. We ended the conversation. Well, that cleared things up. Cyrus wasn't just trying to create tension between my wife and me. He was seriously planning to get rid of me in order to take over her and our business. It seems like it will be almost impossible to trust anyone again. I took a deep breath, glanced at the nearly empty glass of rum, and decided it was time to mix another. As I walked back to the bungalow, a dark thought occurred to me. What should I do now? Where should I live? I definitely didn't want to see her again, so Virginia was out of the question. But where could I go? Then it hit me. Why not stay here? Not at the hotel, but in Hawaii itself. This place was perfect, and I really had nothing to return to in Virginia except Maddie. She was in college and would probably understand. There were still a few more calls to make. The next step was to call Sandra. She wasn't thrilled that I called so late, but it was already 6 p.m. on the East Coast. Sorry for the late call, Sandra. I'll try to be brief. I want to continue with the divorce process, but I want to change the grounds to adultery. I wanted to hurt her, and I'm not going to pay her a penny in child support if I can avoid it. I seemed to catch her off guard as she paused before responding. Are you sure, James? Absolutely. I just found out that her affair wasn't a random episode. I don't want to listen to her lies anymore. Fine. If Kurt provides proof, I can work on it tomorrow. I'll let you know the details as soon as she gets the notice. I've already asked Kurt to send you everything he has and to notify me. A text message will be enough. Details needed. Thanks again for everything, James. I'm truly sorry that this happened, but I will do everything I can to help finish this matter." At this point, we hung up. And so, here it was, the end of my marriage. I was about to sink into self-pity when I decided that it was time for a change. I wouldn't let her ruin my life any longer. I took a deep breath, downed the rest of my rum, and mixed another cocktail. It was a taste I could get used to. I put the plate in the sink and sat down in the chair. Now that the main tasks were done, there was still one thing left: finding a new place to live. Easier said than done, especially when you're a stranger here. Where should I start? It was probably worth contacting the concierge. These people seem to know everything and everyone, or at least know someone who does. I put on my sandals, grabbed my drink, and walked along the path to the main building. The doors to the side opened, and cool, air-conditioned air greeted me. It felt pleasant, but I didn't let it distract me from my goal. The concierge desk was to the left, directly opposite the main entrance. She noticed my approach and turned to me with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" she asked. It wasn't easy to stay focused on the task at hand. She was stunning, and my thoughts were far from pure. She looked like a local, with long, wavy hair and a curvaceous figure that perfectly hugged the floral dress she wore. I had to remind myself to stay professional and not just stare at her, so I started a normal conversation. "I hope you can help me. I'm only here for a couple of days, but I've decided that I really like it here, and I want to stay on a more permanent basis. Can you help me find accommodation? I know it's a strange request, but my life has changed dramatically recently, and this seems like the perfect place for a fresh start." She paused, processing my short explanation. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not a real estate agent. I can tell you that it's quite expensive to live here, and most homes in the area are overpriced. However, I can recommend someone to talk to about it. Will that work for you?" "Of course, thank you." She opened a book on her desk, flipped through it, and found what she needed. After writing something down on a small piece of paper, she tore it off and handed it to me. "This is the name of the woman I trust. Call her if you need help. Is there anything else I can assist you with? By the way, yes, what can you do here for fun in the evening? I've been thinking about driving around the island, but am not sure where to start. Also, am curious about what that unlabeled juice in the room is called." These questions seemed to come more easily to her, and she spoke about several options for tourists, some that started right here at the resort, and others that required a taxi. She handed me some brochures and a note. I thanked her and headed back to the bungalow. She seemed to give me a look that could have been interpreted as flirtation, or perhaps I just wanted to think that. Either way, it was flattering. I looked through the brochures I had collected and found a few interesting ones. One was about a helicopter tour of the island, and another focused on military museums throughout the region. At the very least, I knew I wanted to visit the Arizona Memorial. I set aside a few more brochures for later. Additionally, I was intrigued by the note. The juice was called Liloe Passion Fruit, and the contact for finding a home was Leah Maleva, with the number 808-555-1234. I wouldn't say I was ready to jump into a romantic relationship again, but it was flattering that she had decided to flirt with someone like me. Either way, it gave my ego a boost, and I decided to keep her number for the future. I had a few more calls to make that day. The phone rang more times than it had in the past month. First, I dialed Leah, the real estate agent. She picked up with a cheerful voice. "Aloha, this is Leah," she said, her tone warm and friendly. Her voice sounded incredibly pleasant. Were all women in Hawaii like that? I already had the feeling that moving here was the best decision I'd made in a long time. I pulled myself together and introduced myself. "Hello, my name is James. I'm looking for a place to stay long-term, and Kim from the front desk gave me your number. Can you help me?" "Of course. I'd be happy to help. Can you tell me a little about what you're looking for?" "Actually, I don't need anything too big. I think 2 bedrooms will be enough, but I haven't thought about it too much yet. Do you have any preferences about the location?" "Just closer to the ocean," I answered, aware that my response was a bit cliché. Leah laughed softly. "I understand. Okay, I'll put together a list of options, and we can look at them together. Does that sound good?" "Yes, that sounds excellent. Thank you so much. I'll call you tomorrow," she said cheerfully. "Aloha." She ended the conversation with the same joyful tone in which she had started. I had a feeling that I was on the right track. There was just one last call left, one I had promised to make to Mai. I always try to keep my word, especially when it came to my daughter. I mixed myself another beach pineapple, as I now called this cocktail, and headed to the lounge chair on the beach. Settling down, I opened my contacts on my phone and looked at her photo. She looked so much like her mother, hopefully without her crazy genes. The phone rang several times before her cheerful voice came on, like a song, suggesting I leave a message. I was halfway through recording the message when the phone vibrated. She was calling me back. It was funny how coincidences like that didn't happen more often, I thought. I answered, interrupting the voicemail. "Hello, dear. Glad you called back so quickly. I didn't even have time to finish the message," I said with a smile. "Hello, Dad." "Yes, sorry, there wasn't much to do," she said, her voice carrying a slight embarrassment. She used the word we. I wondered if she was with a friend or with her mother. I didn't really want to talk to Caitlin, so I decided not to ask. "It's okay. I just wanted to call to let you know that I'm okay. It's truly magical here, and I hope you can come visit someday." "Should I come for a visit?" she asked, then fell silent. I realized I had said something dumb. "Dad, what do you mean?" she asked, her voice rising in confusion. Damn, I should have just been clearer. "Darling, I decided to stay here forever. I haven't found a place yet, but I'll start looking tomorrow." "What? You can't go that far. Now I won't see you at all." Her voice cracked, and I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew she was about to cry. "Maddie, you can always come, and I'll help with the money if you need it. I can even visit you myself," I said, trying to ease the tension. "I'm sorry, but I need to do this," I added. "Do you really need to, Dad? I know Mom ruined everything, but is it really necessary to go to the other side of the world?" This was the conversation I had been afraid of. I didn't want to hurt my daughter, but I felt like I couldn't start over in Virginia. I fell silent, probably for too long. "Dad, are you divorcing Mom?" "God, you're really getting a divorce?" She started crying, and I could barely hold back my own tears. I hated it when my baby was upset. I would do anything to ease her pain. "Maddie, I told you before, and I'll say it again, I may always love your mom, but I won't be able to trust her anymore. And for you, I will always do everything I can. I would really love for you to come visit me. Bring your friend. I'd really like to meet her, and of course, see you again." Sure," she giggled. "Dad, are you trying to buy my happiness?" "I never." I teased her, and on the other end of the phone, I heard her laugh again. I think I also heard another girlish giggle in the background. "Okay, you win. We're on vacation right now, so we'll have time. Send us tickets, and we'll come." For future reference, her name is Sarah Jones. I barely had time to pull the phone away from my ear when I heard joyful screams from both girls on the other end. "Ooh, we're flying to Hawaii." When the cheers finally died down, we said our goodbyes. I knew I had a lot to do, but at least I could show her that I loved her and would always be there for her. After finishing the call, I sat back on the sun lounger and finished my cocktail. It was still early afternoon, though it was already getting dark in Virginia. I was still a little jet-lagged, but not enough to go to bed. I got up, went back to the bungalow, and looked through the brochures again. One of them was about a helicopter tour, another described underwater diving, but it probably required more effort than I was willing to put in right now. I took another look at the booklet with information on military museums and placed it upstairs. There was also a city tour by bus, an interesting option that suited my rum-fueled mood. I called the front desk, and Kim kindly helped organize everything. It seemed like this girl might actually lead me down a dangerous path while I was here. After closing the bungalow, I went on the bus tour. The bus was already waiting at the entrance, so I got on, and off we went. The tour lasted 2 hours and covered the entire city. There were a lot of interesting shops and a couple of restaurants I wanted to try. I remembered the name of one, JY's Island. It looked like the perfect place for dinner. The sign didn't stand out much from the background of the surrounding buildings, and the restaurant had the feel of a real backyard establishment. I could almost imagine it being featured on one of my favorite cooking shows, the one with the crazy-haired host. I was dropped off back at the resort at. After leaving the resort, I decided to go to dinner. I called a taxi and headed to the restaurant. When I arrived, I settled down at the bar. The staff was very friendly, and the food was excellent. I ordered some local tuna, lightly fried, and some local fruit whose name I couldn't even pronounce. As I sat there eating, I did what I enjoy most, watching people. Next to the door, there was a group of 4 men who looked like athletes, strong, muscular, and chatting happily while drinking, having long since finished their meal. A little further away, 3 women sat at a table, each with fish on their plates. To the right of the door sat a couple, holding hands and sipping wine. After dinner, further down the bar from me, an older man sat, clearly enjoying his conversation with the young bartender. It seemed like even someone his age could still have a good time in a place like Hawaii. I waved to the bartender and ordered another beer, but at that moment, the older man stood up from his chair and walked over to me. He sat down in a nearby chair and extended his hand. Howard Denton, he introduced himself. I shook his hand. James Holmes, I replied. And what brings you to this paradise, all alone? He asked, getting straight to the point. I thought about it for a moment. I knew the truth might be a bit shocking, but I was curious to see his reaction. My business partner tried to kill me, and then somehow convinced my wife that I was cheating on her, which I never did. And as it turned out, she's been cheating on me with him for a long time. This all happened just a few days before our wedding anniversary, I explained. Howard suddenly burst out laughing. It wasn't the reaction I expected, but his loud laugh was contagious, and I found myself laughing too. This is the craziest story I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot. He said, my wife left me 3 years ago for a younger guy. She said he had a horse the size of her scream. He laughed again. It's a pity that the boy didn't have a penny, and she never got the wealth she was hoping for. Ha, ha, ha. He continued to laugh and patted me on the back. James, you just made my day. Let me buy you a drink. Who was I to say no to free drinks and good conversation? We had another drink, discussing the many challenges women had brought us. Howard seemed content with his story, and I envied him. His wounds had healed, while mine were still fresh. At least the alcohol helped take the edge off the pain for a while. When the bartender announced that it was the last round, I stood up and extended my hand. It was really nice to meet you, I muttered, hoping that my slightly intoxicated words would make sense. Come here, Howard said, and gave me a hug. You're a cool guy. I really enjoyed talking to you. At that moment, he hiccuped, and we supported each other as we went outside. The night was ending in the most unusual way. We swayed toward the marina, and the thought crossed my mind that maybe he was planning to rob me and throw me overboard, but I wasn't concerned enough to worry about it. We reached the pier, where a huge 3-deck yacht was docked, complete with an upper helm station. The ship looked impressive, and there was a small boat set up on deck for landing. Welcome to my humble abode, he muttered, waving his hand toward the yacht. Do you want to come in? I had nowhere else to go, so I nodded. As soon as I did, the world started to spin, and I had to grab the side to steady myself. We slowly climbed aboard and entered the wardroom, which had soft chairs. I settled into one of them. Howard pulled out a bottle of dark rum, without a label, and poured us both a glass. Without much ceremony, we clinked glasses and drank. The last thing I remember is finishing my glass before everything faded to black. I woke up to the sound of seagulls and the gentle rocking of the boat. My head ached terribly, and my mouth felt dry. I stood up, found the refrigerator next to the sofa, and took out a bottle of water. I drank half of it and took a deep breath. I should drink less, of course, but that's what everyone with a hangover always says. Looking around, I saw many other boats docked nearby. Some were as large as Howard's, but most were much smaller. The sun was just rising over the mountain peaks, and a light breeze gently swayed the boats. A light breeze pleasantly blew across my face. If it weren't for the headache, the landscape would have been simply amazing. From the stairs leading down to the lower deck, I heard some grumbling. I realized that Howard was probably waking up in the same state as me, or maybe worse. He peeked upstairs, swaying and muttering something under his breath. He plopped down on the sofa, raised his head, and suddenly burst into laughter. Boy, he said, looking straight at me. It was a great night, I agree, but now I really need a cup of coffee and a couple of headache pills. He nodded and went to the cabinet, pulling out a bottle of pills. Then, he opened another tall cabinet on the opposite wall and revealed a coffee maker. I took 4 tablets while he prepared the coffee. I washed them down with water and sank back into the chair I had slept in all night. So, what are your plans for today? He asked. Actually, yes. I need to finish some business in Virginia and start looking for housing. For now, I've settled on White Sands, I replied. Howard snorted and settled on the couch, waiting for his coffee. If you have some free time or need help, call me, he said, handing me his business card. Several questions crossed my still groggy mind. Why does he carry business cards in his pocket? How did he keep them there after all the drinking? And why does he need me, other than as a drinking companion, of course? I didn't ask any of these questions. I was clearly not in the mood for a long conversation. We drank our coffee in silence, enjoying the light breeze and the quiet of the harbor. After a while, Howard spoke again. So, what now? You mentioned yesterday that you're selling your business. What's next? When Howard was sober, he immediately got straight to the point. He must have been a very good businessman before he retired. It was interesting that I had told him about selling my business, although I didn't remember it myself. Apparently, I had been completely drunk. To be honest, I don't know yet. I decided to move here, but I haven't thought beyond that. If possible, I would like to fly again, I said. He nodded, his gaze turning thoughtful. Well, if you need anything while you figure it out, contact me. With that, we said our goodbyes, and I got off his yacht. I called a taxi and returned to the resort, where I immediately went to the bungalow and collapsed on the bed. The sleep was wonderful, but soon my phone rang again. Hello, I muttered into the pillow. Mr. Holmes, I just wanted to clarify, are we still meeting regarding the house inspections? Damn, I completely forgot, I mumbled. Yes, sure. I'm a little late, but I can be there in about 30 minutes. Will that work? Quite. See you soon. Damn. I quickly jumped out of bed, showered, put on clean clothes, brushed my teeth, and ran out to the reception desk. Kim was there again, looking just as gorgeous as before. Hello, Kim. Could you help me? Your friend Lee mentioned meeting her at her favorite cafe, but she didn't say where it is. Oh yes, Mr. Holmes. She likes this place, 2 blocks away, called Kona Hut. It's just a regular coffee shop, but it has a nice atmosphere. I thanked her and rushed out the door. I took a taxi to the cafe, grateful for the decision. The local blocks turned out to be much longer than I had expected. The nearest intersection was at least 2 miles away, and the second one was still that distance. I thanked the driver as he drove away, and I entered the cafe. A woman was waiting for me at the table by the door. She was clearly a local, with dark skin and smooth raven black hair. She smiled and waved at me, inviting me to sit opposite her. On the table in front of her were about 10 printouts of houses that we were apparently going to see. Hello, Mr. Holmes, she said softly. I'm Leia. Hello, and please, call me James. Okay, James. Let's first look at these options and eliminate the ones you don't like based on appearance. There's no point in seeing a house if you don't like how it looks, she suggested. I smiled. Great, we'll do that. I think my motto now is Hakuna Matata, my new daily credo. We sat down and went through the 10 houses she had chosen. She spoke in detail about each one, pointing out the advantages and possible disadvantages. I wasn't afraid of small renovations, but I also didn't want to buy a house that was completely dilapidated. I picked 3 houses that I wanted to see in person, and we agreed to meet again at the cafe the next morning to visit them. By lunchtime, I returned to the resort and decided to get some sleep. I woke up a few hours later, still feeling the effects of the previous day's drinking, though not as acutely. I took a few more ibuprofen tablets, drank some water, and headed to the beach. I sat down on a sun lounger and just relaxed, listening to the sound of the waves. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the phone rang again. James, this is Tony. We have news about Cyrus. I'll send you a link to the article, but in short, he won't cause you any more problems. The FBI is still reviewing your company records, but as far as I know, they have found no evidence that he used your legitimate business for his schemes. The only thing they found in his warehouse were plans to use planes to fly to Mexico. Because of everything that happened, the court ruled in your favor and allowed the partnership to be dissolved. Now it's 100% your business. Do you want me to accept an offer from the West Coast as soon as the feds complete their audit? I was stunned. Everything had happened so quickly, and I hadn't had time to fully process it. While I was a little saddened by the thought of leaving the company, which had become like a second child to Maddie, I felt it was the right decision to distance myself from Cyrus' past. Well, Hakuna Matata. I'll read the article later, maybe with a little rum. Yes, please do it. Thanks for everything, Tony. This news has given me new energy. I got up, headed to the main building, and had dinner at the resort restaurant. I checked my phone and opened the link Tony had sent. The article included a photo of the motel, apparently the same one where Kurt had seen Cyrus. The photo showed several police cars from different agencies and even a SWAT van. The article itself was short but informative. It reported that the FBI had raided the motel with the support of ADF officers and local police after receiving an anonymous tip about fugitive Cyrus Black. The authorities considered him armed and extremely dangerous. During the raid, a lot of evidence was found, but the fugitive himself was still at large. It seemed he finally understood how to truly escape justice. I was a little worried that he might still cause trouble, but at least he wasn't around right now. With so many police involved, I hoped he stayed on the run for a long time. I slept peacefully that night and woke up feeling refreshed. I reviewed the 3 houses that Lee and I had chosen and then went to meet her. She showed me all 3 houses, and to be honest, they were all nice, but none of them moved me enough to want to buy them. Leia took me to lunch, asked me a few questions, and promised to continue the search. She dropped me off at the resort, saying she would stay in touch in the coming days. I spent the next few days relaxing on a sun lounger on the beach, and I went to the gym several times to keep from gaining weight from all the delicious food and drinks. A couple of days later, while sitting on a sun lounger, I suddenly realized that the answer had been right in front of me the whole time. I watched the birds circling in the sky and the boats passing by, and it dawned on me. I called Lee and asked her to look for boats that fit my requirements. She laughed at first until she realized I was serious. Then she promised to get back to me with an answer. I knew boats weren't really her thing, but I figured it couldn't be that difficult. It took her 2 more days to search, and then she arrived at the resort, sat down next to me on the beach, and showed me several options. I immediately saw the one. It was love at first sight. Of course, I still wanted to see it in person, but I intuitively knew this was exactly what I was looking for. The photographs showed a tall and proud wooden vessel. The body was completely white with dark varnished railings and paneling all around. The description said it was 36 feet long, had 5 berths, 2 toilets, and was launched in 1972. I assume the sleeping spaces meant. The boat had a new Cat diesel engine and had recently been cruising to and from Alaska. Her name was Lady of the Night, and the price was quite affordable. We decided to see the old lady in person, and oh my God, she was gorgeous. The interior had been restored and was as well maintained as the exterior. It was clear that the boat had received a lot of love and attention. I told Lee I wanted this boat and asked her to use all her skills to help me get it. I spent the rest of the day in a state of pure joy, imagining how much fun this ship would bring me. Now, I just had to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. It seemed like I was asking myself that eternal question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I knew, without a doubt, that I still wanted to fly. Flying had always been my first love, my first passion. Unlike the unfaithful wife, flying had never let me down. I was sure I wasn't going to work for the government anymore. The experience with Thema made it clear that no one could be trusted. Maybe it was time to do something for myself. I wondered if there were any charter services nearby. Perhaps I could find one of the small islands where few people live or where tourists rarely visit and fly there. I remembered that movie with Harrison Ford and thought it could be fun. In any case, it was worth thinking about. I was going to ask Kim. This woman knew everything and was always very pleasant to talk to. However, leaving that for later, I returned to my formal business of enjoying my pineapple cocktails on the beach. Amazingly, they never gave me a hangover, only when I was drinking something dark with Howard. Maybe it was the juice that kept me hydrated, but it wasn't that important. I went to the main resort building, to their mobile office, and printed out the power of attorney that Tony had sent me. I read it twice, making sure I wasn't giving him too much authority. Everything was exactly as I had requested, with the specific instruction that Tony would only have the right to manage the transfer of assets and funds relating to the sale of my business and partnership. I filled out the required information and took the document to the front desk. I asked Kim to notarize the document, and she agreed. I signed it, and she stamped it with the seal she took out of the drawer. She signed it herself. Was there really anything this woman couldn't do? She even managed to send the document via priority mail back to Tony in Virginia. While she was preparing the envelope, I asked her about local air charter services. She mentioned several options, but it all depended on the destination. She handed me 2 brochures advertising flights to some of the islands, and I thanked her. I planned to find out on my own how far and how often these flights operated. Sleep was restful again that night. Time passed quickly over the next few days, and the deal was set to take place as soon as the federal investigation was complete. Cyrus was still on the run, and Caitlin received a summons. First, she tried to call me, and then sent several messages. I replied with a simple text, "Communicate with me only through Sandra." Was I a coward for avoiding talking to her? Maybe. My excuse was that I was sure she would try to talk me out of the divorce, and I had no desire to remain married to her. I would have to talk to her eventually, but I was going to put it off as long as possible. It was tough, but with most of my savings and a cashed-in retirement fund, I was able to buy a boat. I paid for her to be temporarily moored on Oahu and made arrangements with the locals to clean up and prepare her for occupancy. The main obstacle in this process was my wife. She didn't want a divorce and initially thought she could talk me out of it. Luckily, she didn't try to force us to go to therapy or anything like that, but she believed she could convince me that she loved me enough that we could make peace after her betrayal. Through my lawyer, I told her to go find Cyrus if she wanted intimacy that badly. I know it was cruel, but I thought she deserved it. In the end, I had to return to Virginia to finalize everything. I spent as much time as possible with Maddie and promised her again that I would call or text often. I only had to meet Caitlin once, and it was the hardest 30 minutes of my life up to that point. I know I made a mistake, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it right. I love only you. I don't want this divorce, she begged me. So who is Cyrus to you? Just a good lover on the side? How long have you been sleeping together? I know that this happened more than once, the same time when I caught you. I swear it was the only time, James. As crazy as it sounds, I wanted you to catch us so you could feel the same pain I felt when I thought you were cheating on me. Now I understand how stupid it is, but that's how I felt at the time. I'm very sorry for what I did. If I could, I would take it all back. Okay, what about the night I left town? I know he came and stayed with you overnight. Was he just sleeping on the couch? She turned pale, and her eyes opened wide. Yes, she said, but I could tell she was lying. I stared at her, frustrated. You really think I'm an idiot, don't you? I didn't notice this for a long time, but I do now. Love makes us blind, I guess. I looked at her with a cold gaze. He must have been very good if you decided to jeopardize everything we had. James, I'll do anything. Please don't leave me. It meant nothing to me, and I will never do that again. I stayed silent, then shouted, That's enough. I don't want to hear anything more. You threw away the life we were supposed to build together. You did it. You destroyed the only thing I believed in, even when everything else went to hell. You killed my love for you, just as he tried to kill me. After that, she just broke down in tears. It was almost comical if it hadn't been happening to me. How could such a deep love end in such a terrible way? Perhaps they had conspired, or maybe she was foolish enough to fall for his charms after all those years of knowing each other. I left her, telling her it was over between us. Before I left, I gave Maddie tickets for her summer visit. Caitlin wouldn't get her way, and the divorce would happen whether she liked it or not. While I was in town, I spoke to both lawyers and even visited Sean. I mentioned that I was thinking about starting my own charter service in Hawaii and asked if he would be willing to help me. He asked for some time to think it over, and I told him to take as long as he needed. After everything, I returned to Hawaii, my new home. The boat was just perfect for me, and I loved the peaceful silence of the ocean at night. Eventually, the feds wrapped up their investigation and allowed Tony to complete the sale of Rapid Relief Logistics. I only asked that he make sure the new owner would take care of the 3 employees still working there, Jenny, Tammy, and Sean. They were great employees and didn't deserve to lose their jobs because of Cyrus' actions. At this point, I didn't care if Cyrus was ever found. He had lost everything, all for the sake of taking my wife. I hoped he enjoyed life on the run. When I returned, I began exploring the possibility of starting my own charter service, but it would only cover smaller islands. There were already several charter services flying between the major islands, and I didn't know yet if it made sense to compete with them. After returning from Virginia, I decided to change the moorings and moved my boat from Oahu to a more secluded spot further up the island chain, to Molokai. I felt this was a better location to serve all the islands and an ideal place to start my island charter service. In addition, this island was quieter, less populated, and incredibly beautiful with its natural features. Once the sale of the company is finalized, I can begin my work. Until then, I plan to relax on the deck of my boat and enjoy the tranquility of the beach, sipping on pineapple cocktails. Finally, I felt the need for some communication, so I called Kim. I decided I wanted to have some fun and at least ask her out on a date. She agreed to dinner before I even finished asking. We went to Hala Joe's, a seafood restaurant she had recommended. From the outside, the place looked unassuming, but the interior was cozy and pleasant. When we were shown to a table on the back patio, I was taken aback by the view. We had a stunning sight of a small lake, with a white pier extending into its center. The surrounding mountains were lush and vibrant, seemingly coming to life in the dense vegetation. As we sat down, I decided it was time to learn more about Kim. All I knew so far was that she was very intelligent and worked as a concierge. Kim, have you always lived here? I asked. She nodded. Yes, My family is mostly from Koi, but my grandmother lives further north in Amanu. I've been to most of the islands, but I've almost never traveled outside of Hawaii. And you? She asked. Until recently, I lived in Virginia. I decided to sell my business and move here permanently. As for the rest of my family, it's a long story, but I can tell you about it another time. For now, I can tell you I'm in the process of a divorce, and I have a daughter I love very much. I paused before changing the subject. I currently live on Malachi, actually. Well, I live on a boat that's moored there. I'm planning to open a charter service and continue flying, which has always been my true passion. Her smile brightened, lighting up the whole scene around us. She seemed pleased to know that I wasn't just a tourist, but someone who had decided to stay. Our dinner arrived, and we spent the rest of the evening in pleasant conversation, getting to know each other as people often do on first dates. Kim was not only smart, but also very beautiful. Several times, I found myself just watching her, unable to look away. When we finished, I left the bill and a generous tip on the table, and we headed out. Overall, the dinner was a relief. I hadn't been on a first date in a long time, and it was nice to know I could still have a calm, pleasant conversation with a beautiful woman without getting nervous. I drove her back to her apartment afterward. She invited me over for a drink before I could fully ask. Secretly, I hoped this would extend the wonderful evening we were having. James, can you make us a drink while I go get cleaned up? The glasses are next to the refrigerator, and the spirits are in the cabinet above the stove, she said, without waiting for a response. She disappeared down the corridor to the bedroom. I took out 2 glasses and looked in the cabinet to see what she had. I was pleasantly surprised to find good Irish whiskey, so I decided it would be perfect for the evening. I called out from the kitchen, "Do you prefer your whiskey on the rocks or neat?" "Ice, please," came her muffled voice from the bedroom. Grinning, I added ice to her glass and poured whiskey into both. I carried them into the living room and set them on the table. At that moment, I heard the bedroom door open. I sat down on the sofa, and my breath caught when I saw her. She appeared in an outfit that was elegant and alluring, wearing thigh-high stockings with a garter belt, a white lace bra, matching lace panties, and heels that added to her height and presence. "Oh my God, you look amazing," I managed to say. She smiled and slowly spun in front of me, showing off her figure. "Do you like it?" she asked with a playful tone. I set the glass down, stood up, and hugged her from behind, my lips brushing against her neck. I gently kissed the delicate skin on her neck, feeling the softness of her skin. She let out a soft, contented sigh as I nibbled her earlobe, her breath becoming deeper. She turned to face me, her eyes burning with desire. "You're mine," she said, her voice low and full of confidence. If she expected any objections, she was mistaken. She firmly pushed me back onto the sofa, sitting beside me, her arms wrapping around me as she looked into my eyes with a smile. "Someone's clearly happy to see me," she teased, her voice filled with mischief. I struggled to find words, my mind clouded by the moment. It felt like nothing else mattered in the world, just her presence and the warmth of her touch. She watched me closely, seemingly enjoying every second of it. We both found ourselves lost in the tenderness and mutual understanding between us. She looked up at me as if waiting for something, and I couldn't help but smile, running my hand through her hair. In that moment, I wanted to reciprocate her feelings, to show her just how much I appreciated her presence. I knew this evening was going to be something special for both of us. When she stood up, I reached out, gently holding her shoulders, and pulled her into a deep, affectionate kiss. She responded with the same intensity, and when we pulled away, her smile grew even wider. "Most guys wouldn't kiss me after that," she said, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint. "You're special." I smiled back at her, feeling a warmth in my chest. "After tonight, any man would be a fool not to kiss you." "You're incredible." Before she could respond, I gently wrapped my arm around her waist and pulled her toward me, sitting her comfortably on my lap. She let out a surprised laugh, her breath quickening as I lightly caressed her shoulders. With each gentle touch, I saw her relax, giving herself over to the moment. We both knew this was a special time between us, something we didn't want to end. Her breathing became a bit quicker, and she whispered softly, "I want you." Her words were a melody in my ears, and I realized there was no need to hold back any longer. This was a moment we'd both been waiting for. But I still wanted to make sure she knew how much I cared for her, just as she had shown me so much kindness. With a soft sigh, I gently adjusted my position, savoring the closeness and warmth. She responded, wanting to deepen the connection between us, and I was more than happy to meet her halfway, feeling the bond between us grow stronger with each passing second. I focused on her desires, and soon, she began to make soft sounds, completely surrendering to the moment. I held her close, maintaining contact and continuing to show care until she relaxed, resting gently on the couch. I could feel her incredible sensitivity, so I slowed down, ensuring I didn't overwhelm her. I continued to kiss her, moving slowly and attentively, savoring every moment. When I reached her collarbone, I traced my lips along her neck and eventually kissed her tenderly on the lips again. This time, the kiss was soft, full of love and calm. Her eyes, no longer burning with desire, were now filled with happiness and peace. "That was incredible, James," she said with a satisfied smile. "You can do that anytime you want." I felt our mutual attraction return, and she pulled me closer. Now, our touches were slow and tender, full of care. We kissed as if we had known each other forever, exploring the depth of our connection. It felt like a true union. We moved in sync, enjoying the quiet closeness between us. She shifted beneath me, and it felt as though we were perfectly in tune with each other. Her breathing deepened, and soon, I realized she was just as connected to this moment as I was. We wrapped ourselves around each other, our connection growing stronger. Exhausted and content, I gently lowered myself to give her another soft kiss. We lay there, holding each other, catching our breath, until the intensity of the moment gradually faded. We then went to the bathroom together, where we shared a quiet and intimate shower, embracing and cherishing each other's presence. When we finished, we dried off and returned to her bedroom, where we shared a quiet moment before falling asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, I woke up to find the bed next to me empty. I got up and found Kim in the kitchen, sipping a cup of coffee. She looked serious, and the mood shifted immediately. "We need to talk," she said. I braced myself, thinking the worst. No man wants to hear those words after such a night. "James, I really like you," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "Last night was wonderful, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did." I smiled at her. "Kim, it was amazing. You're an incredible woman, and you made me truly happy." She smiled back but seemed a little tense, as if waiting for something. "I just want you to know that I'm not looking for anything serious right now," she continued. I felt a sense of relief. I had feared she might want to move in together or even talk about marriage after just one night. "I'm also not ready for something serious right now," I replied with a smile. "I really like you, and I'd love to see you more often though." Her expression softened, and we both seemed to be on the same page. We were taking it one step at a time, and I was grateful for the mutual understanding between us. "But I'm definitely not thinking about marriage or children just yet," I added with a smile and a light laugh. She smiled too, clearly hearing what she had expected. "Of course, I want to keep dating you, silly. I've never had such fun as I did with you yesterday. I definitely want to do that again," she added, laughing softly. Her laughter was contagious, and I couldn't help but smile widely in response. I walked up to her, pulled her into a tight hug, and kissed her tenderly on the lips. When we parted, we both knew it was time for me to leave. I told her I would definitely call and come back soon. After gathering myself, I kissed her again, this time a little more passionately, not wanting to leave. Returning to my new home on Malachi, I felt elated. As I brought my boat to the dock, I noticed something unusual. The adjacent space was now occupied by Howard's massive yacht. I walked up to the boat and shouted, "Hey, on board for a minute?" A minute passed before Howard looked out the window to see who was calling. When he saw me, he came out onto the deck and waved, inviting me to come aboard. "Come on up, James. It's good to see you, my friend," he said. I was curious why he was here, but for the moment, I didn't ask. He was my only real friend on the islands, and a good one at that, so I decided to leave the questions for later. We entered his cabin and took our usual spots. I settled into an easy chair, and he preferred to sit on the sofa. "James, I like your choice of port," he said. "This is truly a great place to work. Oahu was nice, but it's just so peaceful here." "Thanks, Howard. I'm glad you like it here. You're probably wondering why I'm here, right?" I replied, sharing the same thought that had crossed my mind earlier. With a grin, Howard said, "Well, we can both appreciate the wonderful things that can be distilled, right?" I laughed. "Haha, that's why I love you. Actually, I have a proposal for you. I know you've been looking for a place to start your new charter business, and I want to help," he continued. "I've got a lead on a plane for sale. The pilot's retiring and just wants to make a little extra money to move to the Midwest. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Well, I don't know all the details, but it's a 1957 Beaver, whatever that means, and it's been very well taken care of. I have a vested interest here, too. I've got friends who are coming down for a vacation. They want to go to one of the uninhabited islands and spend a couple of nights camping on the beach. If I help you buy this plane, would you be willing to help me? Sometimes, I have guests like this, and I could really use a partner to fly them around. I thought about it for a moment. I would need to get registered here, get some good cards, and handle other necessities. But there's no reason not to start my business with such exclusive clients. I looked at him, smiled, and said, I think this is a great idea. Of course, I'll need to settle all the official stuff, register both myself and the plane with the state, and study the area's maps and so on. When will your friends be arriving? They're flying into Honolulu next week. He must have noticed the surprise on my face because he quickly added, sorry for the short notice, but I'm really in a tough spot and could use your help. I took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, Howard, I'll do the paperwork tomorrow. Get in touch with your guy and tell him I want to take a look at the plane. If it's in good condition, I'll consider buying it. He smiled. Sounds like a great plan. We both laughed, then had a few drinks and continued to chat. I ended up falling asleep on my own couch, never making it back to my cabin. The next day was truly terrible. Damn Howard and his dark rum, I muttered under my breath. From now on, I would only drink my own drinks. Not only was I nursing a hangover, but working with the civil servants was slow and tedious. They required me to fill out a mountain of paperwork and provide proof of my experience and pilot's license. Thankfully, my license was fine, but all my flight logs were still in Virginia. I decided to call Sean. After a brief conversation where he told me about his new boss, I updated him about my new business. Listen, Sean, would you want to work with me again? I'm not promising big money at first, but I've got a spare cabin on the boat, and I could really use someone I trust. The space itself will compensate for the temporary reduction in salary, I said, trying to stay positive. You know, that sounds good, Howard replied. This new guy, well, he's not bad, but he's not great either. He's already told Jenny and Tammy that he doesn't really need them because he has his own office staff. The only thing he needs are planes, a mechanic to service them, and pilots. He hired 2 new pilots, a man and a woman, and I mean this in the kindest possible way, but their attitudes are so high that it's surprising they can even breathe. I chuckled at his description. Listen, talk to the girls and see if any of them want to move here. I know Tammy has a husband and a child, so it might be difficult, but Jenny is alone, right? Yes, but I'll still talk to both of them. Tammy might even want to move. She told me yesterday that she caught her lazy husband cheating while she was working hard. He sat at home having an affair with a 19-year-old neighbor. The guy is an idiot, if you ask me. I couldn't agree more, I said. That's definitely not good. Okay, I'll talk to them and let them know I'm on Malachi now. I already have a lead on a plane that needs to be checked. I could use some help here, and it would be nice to see familiar faces. Also, I need my flight logs from the office to register in this state. Got it. I'll get them right now, James. Don't look at that plane until I get there. Of course, buddy. I'll send you your flight tickets tomorrow, and we'll discuss all the details. Also, let me know what the girls decide. We ended the call, and I felt relieved knowing that at least my friend Sean had my back here. The next day started without incident. I had sent him the e-tickets the day before, so he was already flying somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. I briefly spoke with Howard about Sean's arrival, his friend, and the plane. Howard assured me that the plane was in excellent condition, but I still had some reservations. I wanted to check it out with my friend. Sean arrived late in the afternoon, flying a small plane from Honolulu to our airfield on Malachi. I took a taxi to the airport to meet him. When he stepped off the plane, I was ready to greet him with a big hug. Sean wasn't particularly sentimental, but we'd been through a lot together, so it felt natural to meet like that. We took a taxi to the docks, and I showed him to his bunk. After he threw his suitcase in there, we headed to Howard's. He had contacted a friend, and the plane was supposed to arrive in an hour, as it needed to fly in from another island. We sat on Howard's boat, sipping iced tea. Sometimes it's good to freshen up before dehydration sets in, right? About an hour later, after some casual conversation, we heard the roar of the engine as the seaplane approached the dock. The pilot was clearly a skilled professional and expertly brought the plane straight to the pier. We walked out onto the dock, and the plane looked in perfect condition. The pilot opened the door and stepped onto the ground, one foot in front of the other. I was surprised to see that the plane was being flown by a woman who appeared to be around 50, but looked fantastic for her age. She shook her head, and her light brown ponytail flew into the air as she walked up to Howard, shook his hand, and then turned to me. "You must be James," she said, holding out her hand. "My name is Martha, but everyone calls me Marty. It's very nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too, Marty," I said, shaking her hand. "The plane looks great." I was a little worried when I heard it was a 1957 model, but it doesn't look its age at all, just like its pilot, I thought to myself. "Thank you," she replied with a proud smile. "I was involved in its restoration myself. I did most of the work over the past few years. Do you mind if my friend and I take a closer look at it?" I asked. She waved her hand dismissively at the plane and smiled before walking over to Howard. Before we even had time to look inside, they were already quietly talking. When we looked into the cabin, it was clear that the plane had been well maintained. The seats were upholstered in white leather, the dashboard looked new, and the windows were in excellent condition, not a scratch to be seen. Sean climbed out and Sean opened the engine hood to inspect the 627 SM engine. He checked several connections, running his hands over one of the propeller blades. Sean asked me to turn the controls and rudder pedals a few times, pleased to find that all the parts moved easily. There were no cracks or other signs of mechanical fatigue. However, he mentioned that he would likely remove some parts to visually inspect everything before allowing me to fly with passengers on board. After about 20 minutes of examination, he looked at me and smiled. I approached the pilot and smiled back. "Marty, I think we like the plane. How much do you want for it?" She thought for a moment. "I asked for $450,000, but for you, they'll give it up for $400,000. It was a lot of money, but it seemed like a fair price, considering the condition of the aircraft. Such planes in this condition could easily cost $500,000 on the mainland. Marty, if you lower the price to $375,000, I think we can agree," I suggested. "Okay, I think I can concede up to that amount." We shook hands and went back to Howard's cabin for a drink to celebrate. Marty limited herself to one glass since she still had to fly back home. She briefly told us about her life on the islands and how she had recently lost her husband of almost 30 years. She had decided to return to the mainland to be closer to her grandchildren. I felt sympathy for her loss, but was glad she had a family with whom she could spend the rest of her life. We agreed that I would pick up the plane once all the financing documents were completed, and we said our goodbyes. She sailed away from the dock, accelerated, and took off toward her island. Sean and I said goodbye to Howard and headed back to my boat. It wasn't easy to sleep that night. The weather worsened, and a storm swept over the island, causing the boat to rock violently. It rained for the next few days, but the skies cleared soon after. The financing paperwork took another week, and I was finally the proud owner of a 1957 DHC 2 Beaver SE plane. Sean and I took my boat for a day's sail to her island, where he returned the boat to our pier, and I moved the plane. The old plane was a joy to fly and gave me no problems. Of course, I got back much earlier than Sean, so I hung out at Howard's until he arrived at the dock. Over the next few weeks, we completed all the official permits and licenses. Our business, Puddle Jumpers, was officially founded. Jenny, the office clerk, decided to stay in Virginia and took a job at FedEx. Tammy, our former office manager, decided that. Sean opened the engine hood to inspect the 627 SM engine. He checked several connections, running his hands over one of the propeller blades. Sean asked me to turn the controls and rudder pedals a few times, pleased to find that all the parts moved easily. There were no cracks or other signs of mechanical fatigue. However, he mentioned that he would likely remove some parts to visually inspect everything before allowing me to fly with passengers on board. After about 20 minutes of examination, he looked at me and smiled. I approached the pilot and smiled back. "Marty, I think we like the plane. How much do you want for it?" She thought for a moment. "I asked for $450,000, but for you, they'll give it up for $400,000. It was a lot of money, but it seemed like a fair price, considering the condition of the aircraft. Such planes in this condition could easily cost $500,000 on the mainland. Marty, if you lower the price to $375,000, I think we can agree," I suggested. "Okay, I think I can concede up to that amount." We shook hands and went back to Howard's cabin for a drink to celebrate. Marty limited herself to one glass since she still had to fly back home. She briefly told us about her life on the islands and how she had recently lost her husband of almost 30 years. She had decided to return to the mainland to be closer to her grandchildren. I felt sympathy for her loss, but was glad she had a family with whom she could spend the rest of her life. We agreed that I would pick up the plane once all the financing documents were completed, and we said our goodbyes. She sailed away from the dock, accelerated, and took off toward her island. Sean and I said goodbye to Howard and headed back to my boat. It wasn't easy to sleep that night. The weather worsened, and a storm swept over the island, causing the boat to rock violently. It rained for the next few days, but the skies cleared soon after. The financing paperwork took another week, and I was finally the proud owner of a 1957 DHC 2 Beaver SE plane. Sean and I took my boat for a day's sail to her island, where he returned the boat to our pier, and I moved the plane. The old plane was a joy to fly and gave me no problems. Of course, I got back much earlier than Sean, so I hung out at Howard's until he arrived at the dock. Over the next few weeks, we completed all the official permits and licenses. Our business, Puddle Jumpers, was officially founded. Jenny, the office clerk, decided to stay in Virginia and took a job at FedEx. Tammy, our former office manager, decided that she and her 12-year-old daughter needed a fresh start away from her unfaithful husband. Hawaii quickly became a new beginning for all of us. I helped her move to the island, and she rented a small office in the city. She took the larger room for herself, and I furnished the second one to suit my needs. Sean mostly stayed with me when he wasn't working on the plane. He also found a few part-time jobs at the marina to earn some money. Overall, we weren't too busy, and that was fine with us. About 2 months later, I received a package of documents in the mail. My divorce had officially been finalized the day before. It was a sad day, but I knew it marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. That night, Sean and I decided to focus on a small tiki hut-style bar on the beach. Sean was always there to support me, and he knew I needed a complete distraction from the past. I remember it being a really fun evening. I stayed away from the tequila this time, but the spiced rum worked just as well. We both woke up with terrible hangovers and promised each other to stay away from that bar for a while. In about a week, my daughter was supposed to visit me. She was going to spend a week with me before starting a new semester at college. I prepared 2 cabins for them, though I knew one of them would be more like a spacious closet. I also went to the store to stock up on food for the galley. I picked them up at Honolulu International Airport and planned to fly them to Malachi by seaplane when I saw us. As they were leaving the security area, I rushed to my daughter and hugged her tightly. I had missed her so much, and I couldn't help but express it. "Maddie, oh my God, I missed you so much," I said, looking at her girlfriend and smiling. "And this must be that wonderful girl." "Dad, this is my girlfriend, Sarah Jones." "Sarah, this is my dad," Maddie introduced us. "It's very nice to finally meet you, Mr. Holmes. After meeting your, wife, or rather, excuse me, ex-wife, I was really looking forward to this meeting," Sarah said, embarrassed. The poor thing looked so tense, so I decided to calm her down a bit and let her know what the mood would be for the week. "Please, call me James, or Dad, if you feel comfortable enough. While you're here, I want you both to relax and enjoy your time. If you need anything, let me know, and I'll make it happen. Well, girls, grab your bags, and let's go to the local terminal. I'll explain everything on the way," I said. They ran to get their suitcases and returned to me at the entrance to the local terminal. Calling it a terminal was an exaggeration. It had a couple of rows of benches, sliding doors leading to the runway, and a counter that was almost always empty. And of course, there was a guard at the door to make sure no one accidentally ran out to the runway. We walked out onto the paved area, and I led them to the seaplane. It was on floats but could release its wheels if necessary to land on a regular runway. I loaded their things into the luggage compartment, and we buckled up. Taking off, I pointed the nose of the plane toward Malachi. "Well, are you ready for the new semester?" I asked to start a conversation. "Of course, Mr. H. Sorry, I mean, Dad. I need to get used to it." Sarah became embarrassed. "Maddie's mom usually insists on calling you Caitlin or Mrs. H. I was surprised that she used my last name, but it didn't bother me anymore. I no longer felt resentment toward her mother, but I still didn't want to meet her either. "It's okay, we'll get used to it over time," I reassured them. "In general, yes, everything is fine. Sarah and I have moved in together, and school this year isn't going to be as hard as last year," Maddie completed her answer. I remembered her complaints about exams and the stress she'd been under. I was glad to hear that at least that part of her life was getting better. "Maddie, Sarah, I want you both to have a wonderful time while you're here. If you don't want to go anywhere else, I've prepared cabins on my boat. I've arranged 2 rooms, but I'm not so old-fashioned to think you'll sleep separately. You can use one of the rooms as a spacious closet or something like that." They both blushed, and Maddie, as always, made a playful comment. It was mostly for show, but it looked funny, and we all laughed. It felt good to laugh with her again. It had been too long since we'd spent time like this. "As soon as we get there, we'll unload your things and go meet my neighbor Howard. I think you'll enjoy talking to him. Afterward, I'll take you to dinner." "How does that sound?" "Certainly," they answered in unison. My intuition told me that they spoke in unison quite often, and it was wonderful. I thought to myself that I needed to get used to seeing my daughter as a grown woman. We spent the rest of the flight chatting mostly about student life. It was clear these 2 women were happy together, and it was noticeable to everyone around them. When we landed on the water, it was their first experience with seaplane travel, so of course, they were excited. After parking the plane at the dock, we headed to my boat. My daughter exclaimed, "Dad, my God, is this your boat?" "Yes, it's mine. I let Sean, my mechanic and friend, use one of the cabins." "Do you remember him from Virginia?" "Oh, yes, I think I remember." "Cool, Dad. Which cabin is ours?" I took them downstairs, showed them their cabin, and pointed out where the bathroom was located. I also indicated where Sean slept and where my cabin was, then led them to the galley. The girls sat down at the table, and I briefly explained how the small kitchen worked. It took no more than 4 minutes. "Girls, get settled, and when you're ready to meet my friends, come on deck," I said. They disappeared into their cabin, and I mixed myself a beach pineapple drink and settled into my favorite chair on the deck, sipping the cocktail. I was enjoying the calls of the seagulls when suddenly I heard a slight groan coming from below. Thinking about my daughter having a night was the last thing I wanted to do, so I turned on the radio and lost myself in the 80s playlist I had on my iPod. Down Under by Men at Work was playing. It was funny how the music wasn't that great, but it was nice to listen to since it reminded me of when I was young, and the music was new. About 30 minutes later, the girls came up on deck, looking a little embarrassed but happy. I really didn't want to know what they were doing. If it weren't about my daughter, I might have been curious, but with her, I didn't want to imagine it. "Well, are you ready to have a drink and meet my neighbor?" I asked. "Certainly. What do you have?" Sarah asked. "I call it the beach pineapple. It's just rum with juice that I think tastes like pineapple. I came up with this drink when I first arrived here and spent almost all my time on the beach," I explained. "Tasty. I've already prepared a whole batch in the galley. You can pour yourselves a glass." They did so and joined me on deck, each with a full glass. We got off the dock and headed toward Howard's boat. If they were impressed by my 36-foot boat, their eyes literally widened when they saw his huge yacht. "Hey, Howard, can we come on board?" I shouted, expecting him, as usual, to be dozing somewhere below. To my surprise, a beautiful red-haired woman appeared and invited us on board. "Get up, Howard. Sean is here, arguing about which beer is better. Personally, I think all beer is the same and disgusting, but that's just my opinion," she said with a smile. We boarded, and she extended her hand. "My name is Tanya Pierce. My friends and I came to Hawaii for a week to take a break from real life and feel like normal people." I was speechless for a moment, recognizing her. It was Tanya Pierce, a big-screen star who had appeared in several popular films, including her latest film W.Y. City, a serial killer thriller set in Chicago. I had seen it, like probably the rest of the planet. I didn't know that Howard knew such famous people, but it didn't particularly surprise me. He was well-connected. "Nice to meet you, Tanya. My name is James, and yes, I recognize you," I said, finally finding my voice. She smiled, apparently used to being recognized everywhere. "The price of fame, I guess. You said Howard and Sean were arguing about beer? This should be interesting." "Of course, follow me," Tanya said, and we followed her inside. She led us to the main cabin, where Sean was sitting in my usual chair and Howard was lounging on the couch. Both were holding a glass of something dark and heatedly arguing about which beer was better and why. Tanya coughed slightly, attracting their attention. Howard looked up first. "Oh, hi, James. I take it one of these lovely girls is your daughter, Madison?" "As always, full of charm." "Yes, this is my pride and joy," I said, pointing to Maddie. "And this is Sarah, her girlfriend. I'll have them for the week. Girls, this is my friend Howard, and that guy is Sean, my best friend and mechanic. Though sometimes I think he's just pretending to fix something." I winked at Sean, who gave me the middle finger, and then turned to the others. "Welcome, girls. Don't pay any attention to your father. He's just delusional about being the best pilot in the world," or something like that. The girls were still a little overwhelmed by such company, so they simply smiled and said, "Thank you. Well, James, since you're here, you can help resolve our dispute. Sean thinks the dark stout beer is better than my wheat beer. What do you say?" Howard asked. "I think you're both crazy to sit here and argue about the subtleties of beer when you could go out and enjoy a sunny day," I replied, making quotation marks in the air as I said subtleties. I looked at Tanya and asked, "What do you think, Tanya? Don't you want to go out into the sun and enjoy this beautiful day?" "Oh, yes, just let me call the others from below deck and put on a swimsuit. We can all go to the bay and swim or something," she said and ran down into the hold of the yacht. "You see, at least she has her priorities in place," I said, shaking my head with a smile. "Guys, seriously, Tanya Pierce is here, and you're arguing about beer?" I laughed and approached my daughter. "Ladies, why don't you both go back to my boat and change? We're going to get this giant." Out on the water, we were finally able to enjoy Hawaii the way it was meant to be. It truly promised to be a Hakuna Matata day for all of us. When everyone was ready to go, Howard took his place at the helm of his massive yacht, which was appropriately called the Big Game. Sean and I handed over the mooring lines, and Howard led us away from the dock, maneuvering us around other boats. Once we were at a safe distance, he turned on the diesel engines at full power, and the yacht surged forward. It reached its maximum speed of 17 knots, certainly not a speedboat, but for a boat this large, it was pretty fast. He told us that he'd worked with engineers to increase the yacht's speed from the original 13 knots. The combination of the speed and the light surf created a beautiful spray as the bow of the boat crashed through each wave. It was exciting, and everyone enjoyed it. After about 20 minutes, the yacht slowed down and eventually came to a stop at a bay. From the boat, we could see a beach with almost white sand and crystal clear water gently rolling onto it. Howard pressed a button to lower the anchor and announced that we had arrived. A cry of joy rang out across the boat, and everyone rushed to the back deck. Tanya was the last to rise, followed by 4 other people. She quickly introduced everyone. "Hello, everyone. These are my friends who came with me. Howard already knows them, but I thought it would be nice to introduce you, since we're all going to have a great time." From left to right, my agent and friend, Tyrone. Next to him is his husband, Michael. Next to Michael are my best friends since childhood, Diana and her husband, Marcus. Howard spoke up. "Thank you, T. And these are my local friends, Sean, whom you've already met. The other gentleman is James, the pilot of the seaplane you saw when we arrived. His daughter and her friend are with him. Ladies, I'm sorry, but I already forgot your names." My daughter blushed slightly and introduced herself again. "My name is Madison, but all my friends call me Maddie. This is Sarah, my friend, and we're studying together. It's an honor to be here. By the way, thank you for making this trip so wonderful. We've only been here for a few hours." Everyone laughed at the introductions and started having fun. Maddie and Sarah immediately jumped into the water, and when they emerged, they began splashing each other. Sean was the next to dive in, delighting everyone with a cannonball jump that left us a little drenched. No one seemed to mind. Tyrone and his husband walked to the edge of the boat, and at one point, Michael playfully pushed Tyrone into the water. Tyrone fell with a scream, splashing loudly as he landed in the bay. Everyone winced at the splash. Michael immediately jumped in after him, but was quickly pulled under the water by his husband in return. I sat for a moment, enjoying my drink and watching everyone have fun. Tanya sat down next to me, smiling genuinely. Without all the movie makeup and glitz, she was truly stunning. Her flowing brown hair contrasted beautifully with her pale skin and the freckles on her shoulders. Her eyes were almost emerald green, and you could easily get lost in them. She had a cute snub nose and such soft cheeks that made you want to kiss her. I had to shake myself a little to keep my focus. "It seems you asked something," I said, realizing I had gotten distracted. "Sorry, what did you say?" She smiled, unfazed. "I asked if you like living here. I live in noisy Los Angeles, but sometimes I dream of escaping somewhere far away from everything, living in nature like you." I thought for a moment before responding. "Well, I love this place. I haven't been to Los Angeles, but I can tell you that it's amazing here, especially compared to where I came from. Virginia wasn't bad, but this is something else. But this place, sometimes words fall short," she said. "Why did you move here? What made you decide to do this?" she asked, her curiosity evident. My expression changed slightly, and she noticed it. "Oh, I didn't mean to bring up anything personal," she apologized quickly. I smiled. "No, it's okay. I just needed to get out of a bad situation, that's all." I paused for a moment, unsure how much I wanted to share, but then I continued. "My wife cheated on me, and my business partner tried to take advantage of the situation to get my half of our business." The shock on her face said it all. I realized I had shared more than I intended, so I quickly tried to ease the situation. Honestly, it was all a bit crazy, but I'm fine now. I have a plane, this paradise, my daughter whom I love more than anything in the world, and friends here. Honestly, all of this makes me feel much better now. The shock on her face softened, and she regained her composure. "I'm so sorry to hear that, but I'm really glad to know that you're doing better." "That sounds terrible," she added with a slight laugh. I smiled, relieved by her response. "Oh, let's change the subject. I think we've talked about this enough for today, don't you think? After all, we're in Hawaii." We both laughed. "Let's talk about you. I'm sure no one ever asks you questions about your life, right?" I said with a teasing tone. My sarcasm made us both chuckle. Tanya was surprisingly easy to talk to, much more down-to-earth than I had imagined. I had stereotyped her, assuming that superstars must be distant and inaccessible, but Tanya proved me wrong. She was as genuine and approachable as any normal person I'd met. "Okay, James, let's talk about me. What do you want to know?" she asked, biting her lower lip slightly. It was cute. I hesitated, not wanting to push too hard. "Tanya, you don't have to share anything you're uncomfortable with. I'd love to get to know you better, but I'm not here to dig for personal details." "Of course not," she said, smiling. "I trust you. We just met, but I trust you. If you want to know me better, just ask." She smiled, showing off her dazzling white teeth. It was a beautiful smile. She smiled, a warm and genuine expression for such a beautiful woman. "Okay, let's start with the basics. Where are you from?" "Oh, it's simple," she said. "I'm originally from Nebraska, from a small town called Hastings, just south of I-80 in Grand Island. Well, it's not too small for Nebraska, but compared to where I live now, it feels like a village." She chuckled. "My parents still live there with my brother. He recently turned 19 and will soon leave for military training. My sister is married and lives in Minneapolis with her husband. Their first child is due sometime in January." "Wow, it sounds like you have a wonderful family," I said. "How often do you get to see them?" "Not as often as I would like. I usually come home for the holidays, but that's about it. I literally had to run out the back door of the flower shop just to make it on this little vacation. Felt like a spy on the run," she laughed. "It must be hard, all the attention," I remarked. "Honestly, I can't imagine how anyone copes with it." She tensed slightly, and I quickly added, "I didn't mean anything bad. I just don't think I could handle it. I think you're brave to put up with all of this for your career." She relaxed and gave me a soft smile. "Thank you. Yes, it's difficult at times, but I've gotten used to it. To be honest, what I'm most tired of is how insincere most people can be around me. For example, this conversation is the most real and honest I've had in the last 6 months. Usually, everyone either flatters me or asks for money for some project. It gets boring quickly. Diana, of course, supports me, but she has her own life and can't always be around." "Okay, enough about you and your boring life," I said, sarcasm creeping into my voice. "Let's talk about your vacation this week. How long do you plan to stay here, and what do you want to do?" "Thank you," she smiled. "Actually, my main goal is to relax and just enjoy some solitude for at least a week. I plan to stay here until Saturday, so that's 6 days." She raised her glass, pointing it between us. "This," she said with a playful look, "is to a peaceful vacation." It was exactly what I had hoped for when I left the city. I nodded, raised my glass, and said, "To this." We clinked glasses and took a long sip, finishing our drinks. "You should come visit me in Los Angeles sometime," she said. "I know you do not like crowds, but I would really like to show you my city. We would have many opportunities to have fun, believe me. I think it would be great. Perhaps soon," I replied. To be honest, I liked the idea, although I was still bothered by the age difference and the fact that I was just a pilot, while she was a celebrity. But maybe I should set aside my doubts and simply enjoy life. We both stood up to pour ourselves another glass. It had been a great conversation, and I hoped we would have more moments like this. As it turns out, there would be plenty of them later. Howard announced that we would stay overnight in the bay and head back to port in the morning. Tanya's group wanted to visit one of the small, uninhabited islands in the chain and spend a few nights camping on the beach. Naturally, Howard asked me to take them there in a seaplane. How could I refuse? The only condition was that Maddie and Sarah would fly with us. Tanya nearly gave me a bruise by slapping me on the arm for doubting her decision to invite them. At least she laughed afterward. I was starting to get used to that laughter. That evening, we all gathered in the main cabin and attempted to play a drinking game. We put on the movie Super Cops, and the rule was that every time someone said FAA's name, we would take a shot. I do not know how, but we miraculously watched the entire film without anyone falling overboard. Afterward, we went below deck to our bunks and immediately passed out. There were muffled sounds coming from several cabins, but I did not care where they came from. I fell asleep quickly to the sound of the surf. I woke up to the sound of waves and discovered that I was the second person awake. I found Diana in the galley, waiting for the coffee to brew. I sat down next to her and joined her in waiting. She looked fresh, like she had not drunk too much the night before, or she was simply good at hiding it. Either way, she was attractive in a friendly, neighborly sort of way. "Well, Mr. Holmes, will you pilot us today? I hope you have sobered up enough for it," she said with a tone that was sharp and completely unexpected. "May I just call you Diana?" I asked politely, and she nodded. "I never drink before a flight. It is one of my firm rules, and I would never risk my life or the lives of my passengers." "So you live here, like some kind of—" she asked again, her tone caustic. I had no idea what I had done to deserve such hostility. "Listen," I said, trying to stay composed, "I do not understand what I did to deserve your hostility. But please, do not confuse my calmness with laziness. I used to have my own business in Virginia, and it was quite successful. But thanks to my ex, who broke my heart, I moved here to start over. I still have my own business, but now I run it at a much more relaxed pace." I took a breath, my voice tight with frustration. "I do not need your instructions on how to live." I was seriously indignant, so I got up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the deck. How dare she come here and call me a lazy drunk? I sat in the captain's chair and looked out over the water. There were no boats in sight, and only one commercial airplane was visible far above, probably cruising at around 37,000 feet. The silence was as peaceful as ever. "Sorry," she said quietly behind me. I turned in my chair and saw Diana standing there, looking guilty. "I was rude, and you did not deserve it," she said. "I saw you talking to Tanya yesterday, and I was just worried that you were another clingy guy trying to get close to her and her money." I froze for a moment, then realized she had only been trying to protect her friend. "It is all right, Diana," I said gently. "You were just looking out for your friend, and I appreciate that. Honestly, I just enjoyed talking to her. I have not connected with anyone like that in a long time. I have no intention of taking advantage of her or anyone else." "Thank you," she said. "Sometimes I feel like I have to protect her because no one else will. She does not have a good instinct when it comes to lazy people and parasites." I smiled at her. "And what do you do when you are not accompanying your famous friend?" I grinned to soften the question. She laughed along with me before answering. "My husband and I are both doctors," she said. "He works in sports medicine as an orthopedic surgeon, and I work in obstetrics. We have been friends since childhood. We went to school together. Tanya went to an art college in the Northeast, and I attended medical school in Wisconsin. Tanya and I grew up together, but after school, we lost touch. We both knew what we wanted to do with our lives, but time and distance separated us. It was only a chance meeting in Los Angeles at a charity event for children with cancer that brought us back together. We immediately renewed our friendship and have been inseparable ever since." "Wow, that sounds like a fairy tale." "I am a little jealous," I replied. "My best friend, Todd, lives very far away. I have not seen him in about 8 years. Sean is a great friend and is quickly becoming just as close, but I still miss the old days with Todd." "Well, as they say, Hakuna Matata," I added. "What is that? Did you just quote Disney?" she asked, laughing. "Yes, I did quote it. Since I came here, I have decided not to stress about the small stuff, and I often repeat that phrase in my head." She smiled, but this time she no longer laughed out loud. "Well, that is a positive way to look at things, is it not? Listen," she continued, "sorry again for being rude earlier. I would be happy to talk with you more." She stood up and paused before saying, "You know, Tanya is not indifferent to you. That is, she likes you. I could tell from the way she interacted with you last evening. I did not expect that. Tanya was amazing, but I always thought she was far out of my league. I was just a simple pilot, and she was a celebrity that even dolphins seemed to recognize. Apparently, the expression on my face gave everything away. Diana smiled knowingly. "Believe me," she said, "she likes you. If you take away the whole movie star image and fame, and she is just a woman like anyone else. And you men, you are a real mystery. I think she is attracted to that mystery." "And yes, you are also very charming," Diana said with a playful smile. "So get to know each other better. Who knows what might come of it? Just do not hurt her, otherwise you will have to deal with me." She ended her sentence with a smirk and walked toward the main deck. It had been an unexpectedly interesting conversation. Actually, it was a really interesting conversation. By the time I tuned back into my surroundings, I could hear voices coming from below deck. It sounded like almost everyone was awake, so I decided to head down from the upper deck and get ready for the day. On my way down, I ran into nearly everyone except Howard and Sean. Those two had clearly grown accustomed to sleeping in after a long night and rarely made an appearance before noon. Tanya smiled warmly at me as I passed by, and I turned to the group. "Is everyone ready for an adventure?" I asked. Everyone nodded in agreement. "We're flying out to one of the small islands today, and we'll be setting up camp on the beach, just like we planned. Once we return to the port, you will have 1 hour to get packed and meet me at the plane." I raised the anchor and started the yacht's powerful turbo diesel engines. The boat eased forward, slicing through the calm water as we left the bay. As we gained speed, the vessel surged smoothly toward the port. About 20 minutes into the journey, Sean finally appeared on deck. He nodded at me, but didn't even attempt to smile. I understood. He had probably tried to keep up with Howard during the drinking game again. Never a wise decision. Howard had years more experience in that department. I shook my head slightly and returned my attention to the controls, keeping us on course. About half an hour later, Howard appeared on deck. He looked like someone who had just survived a hurricane. There was no way to sugarcoat it. He was in rough shape. But strangely, his face was lit up with a cheerful smile, completely at odds with the rest of his appearance. He came up beside me at the helm and stood quietly for a moment. "So, how are you feeling?" I asked. "To be honest, you don't look your best." "I could be better," he admitted. "How much longer until we reach the port?" "About 40 minutes. I already told everyone that once we dock, they'll have an hour to gather their things and meet me at the plane. I still need to prepare the aircraft and pick up some supplies." "Got it," he said with a brief nod before heading off to the galley. All in all, it had been a great night on the water, and the coming day looked like it was going to be just as memorable. The coming days promised to be just as exciting, if not more so, than the ones before. I could not wait to spend more time with Tanya. I had not felt this kind of attraction since my college years, and now I felt like a teenager again. The only thing I hoped for was that I would be good enough for her. We arrived at the port without any issues, and everyone went to their cabins and rooms to prepare for the main event. I headed to my boat to collect the necessary supplies and brought them aboard the plane. Once I had stowed my gear, I began the pre-departure inspection. By that time, Sean had already recovered enough to help with the preparations. He did not plan to fly out with us, but he was happy to assist me in getting everything ready. About 10 minutes before our scheduled departure, Tanya and her friends arrived at the plane carrying several bags. I told them we would probably be able to fit everything, though we might need to squeeze things in a bit. This drew some disapproving sighs and grimaces from the girls, while the guys just waved it off. "If we have to leave a couple of bags, it's not a problem," Marcus said casually. "I barely brought anything anyway, so I don't care," Michael added. Tyrone, however, immediately came to the girls' defense. "No, we're not leaving anything behind. Everything will fit." Tanya didn't say anything, she just nodded at his words, and then suddenly burst into laughter. Her laughter was contagious, and soon everyone was joining in. After a few minutes, some people were wiping away tears from laughing so hard. Eventually, everyone settled down, and we managed to load everything onto the plane. Surprisingly, all the bags fit easily, and we even had some space left over. We took off without any trouble and flew toward the chosen island. The landing was a little bumpier than usual, mostly because the surf near this island was stronger than I had expected. Still, we landed safely and pulled the plane up onto the shore. I secured it by tying it to the thickest tree I could find. We set up camp right on the beach as planned. We built a stone circle for the campfire, pitched our small tents, and set up a cooking area with a folding camp table, a stove, and all the necessary utensils stored in a container. Once everything was in place, we gathered in the dining area. "So, listen," I began, stepping into the role of a local guide. "We're all adults here, but I strongly recommend not wandering off alone. Do you see that forest behind us? You can explore it, but don't go too far. It'll be very hard to find anyone in there, especially after dark." After my informal safety briefing, everyone went about their own activities. I unfolded my chair and set it up on the beach, settling in to relax. All I needed now was a pineapple smoothie and I would be living the dream. My peace was interrupted by a shadow falling across my face. "Do you always just sit around? Or do you sometimes walk around these beautiful islands?" Tanya asked, crossing her arms playfully. I looked up and smiled. "Sometimes. It all depends on the company. Are you suggesting we take a walk?" She bit her bottom lip lightly, and I thought it was the cutest thing I had ever seen. "Yes, that would be very nice." I stood up, took her arm gently, and we began walking along the shoreline. I do not know who in their right mind would refuse such a walk, but I was certainly not one of them. I truly enjoyed her company. I barely even thought about the fact that she was probably 10 years younger than me. We walked barefoot, not worrying about time. The tide was rising, and before long, the waves began to wet our feet. When they started to wash up past our ankles, we decided it was time to head back to camp. On the way back, Tanya suddenly reached out and took my hand, gently intertwining her fingers with mine. I looked at her, surprised, and at the same time, deeply moved. Her smile was so bright, it could have lit up the entire beach. That smile said more than any words could. To be honest, it felt like I was floating all the way back to camp. I barely remembered the path until I saw Marcus and Tyrone preparing dinner for everyone. Diana and Michael had just returned with a large stack of firewood, which they added to an already neatly organized pile before sitting down to rest. We had dinner and shared laughs while talking about the day's adventures. I added a few more logs to the fire, and soon the flames were burning brightly as the sky turned to dusk. We sat around the campfire, exchanging stories like old friends. It felt as if I had always been a part of this group, and it was a wonderful feeling. Time flew by, and eventually everyone began to head to their tents for the night. I stayed behind a bit longer to let the fire die down. Then, I turned and made my way toward the tents. Diana and her husband had already zipped up inside. Tyrone and his husband were just climbing into theirs. Maddie and Sarah had also disappeared into their tent while I was still figuring out how to say goodnight. Only Tanya and I remained. We stood in front of the entrance to the fourth tent, and then it hit me. A sudden nervousness, like I was a teenager on a first date. You would think that as a grown man I'd be past this, but something about being alone with this woman completely unraveled my usual confidence. Just because the air was charged with anticipation did not mean anything had to happen between us, but I hoped something might. I unzipped the tent, lifted the entrance flap, and let Tanya go in first. Then I followed her, closing the zipper behind us. "Good night, everyone," I called out to the others. A few quiet voices responded from neighboring tents, offering sleepy goodnights in return. Soft conversations and faint rustling sounds came from nearby, blending with the calming rhythm of the ocean waves. It created a private, dreamlike atmosphere. I slid onto my sleeping bag and lay on my side, propping myself up on one elbow. I looked into Tanya's emerald eyes, and what I saw there made my breath catch. Something intense, something alive. Her gaze was unwavering, filled with emotion, and I felt as though she was seeing right through me. There was nothing else I could do but lean in and kiss her. It started softly, a tender meeting of lips, but the energy between us quickly deepened. She moved closer and, in one fluid motion, shifted above me, sitting gently across my lap. I could feel the warmth of her presence, her hands sliding beneath my shirt, her touch careful and affectionate. Her fingers sent shivers through me, each one tracing something delicate and electric across my skin. My breathing grew uneven as her touch continued, slow and meaningful. There was nothing rushed about it. It felt as though something ancient and unspoken was awakening between us, something beyond words. She gently lifted my shirt, and I felt her lips against my chest. The sensation was overwhelming. Her kisses were soft, and each one seemed to echo through my whole being. I closed my eyes, letting myself fully feel every moment, every gesture. Her hands moved with care, pausing at the waistband of my shorts. I met her eyes and slowly rose to help her, not speaking, just understanding. She sat upright, and for a moment, We were still, close, connected, and completely in sync. There was a silence, thick with unspoken feelings. Our eyes met and held, and in them I saw love, tenderness, and something even deeper, something unnameable but profoundly real. She shifted gently, her fingers brushing against me, and even the lightest touch sent a wave of warmth through me. It felt as though every part of us was tuned to the same frequency, our hearts beating together in perfect rhythm. As if sensing we needed to pause, she leaned in and rested her head on my chest. We stayed that way, motionless, listening to each other's breathing. Her hair brushed against my skin, and I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the quiet beat of her heart beside mine. The closeness felt timeless, infinite. I wanted to stay in that moment forever. Her hands moved gently over my chest again, and I responded by holding her waist, feeling how fragile and soft she was in my arms. I wanted to protect her, to keep this feeling safe. As I slowly lifted her shirt, she smiled at me, the same smile that had stopped my heart the first time I saw it. There was so much warmth and affection in that expression it left me speechless. She leaned into me again, and I felt her skin against mine. Every gesture was filled with care, as if she was offering a piece of her soul with every touch. We stayed wrapped in each other's arms, moving together in quiet harmony, the world outside the tent completely fading away. I could hear her breath becoming slightly quicker, and I felt her body relaxing into mine. We moved gently, slowly, completely present, completely connected. We were completely immersed in the moment, cherishing every second of our closeness. It was more than just a physical connection. It felt like the meeting of two souls who had finally found their way to each other. As she held on to me, she softly whispered my name. The sound of her voice was like the sweetest music I had ever heard. Each word she spoke seemed to resonate deep inside me, as if it went straight to my heart. We moved together in perfect harmony, fully present in the intimacy we were sharing. It felt as if the world outside had vanished, and all that existed was the warmth between us. When we reached that moment of emotional release and overwhelming joy, we both understood something deeply important, that these quiet, shared experiences are what make a bond truly special. This was what love was meant to feel like, not loud or dramatic, but full of connection, comfort, and belonging. Eventually, our breathing slowed, and we lay side by side, still wrapped in the warmth of the moment. She curled up next to me, her head resting gently on my chest. Her body radiated a cozy, calming heat, and I didn't want to let her go. I held her tighter, gently running my fingers through her hair, feeling its softness as her breathing began to settle into a slow, peaceful rhythm. She soon fell asleep on my chest, and I stayed there, holding her close, overwhelmed with a sense of peace and gratitude. It was more than just being together. It was feeling like everything in the world had aligned, just for this. In that stillness, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, happiness, real and quiet and full. I remember thinking, just before I drifted off, how incredibly lucky I was to be here, on this beach, in a tent, with this amazing woman resting beside me. It felt like paradise. The days that followed moved in a similar rhythm. Tanya and I spent as much time together as we could, sometimes sneaking away for a few private moments in the tent. Her friends teased us about it constantly, but we took it all in stride. None of it mattered. We were simply enjoying the time we had, cherishing every opportunity to be close. When it finally came time to pack up and return home, none of us really wanted to leave. It had been more than just a trip. It was a memory we would carry with us for the rest of our lives. If this wasn't love, then it was something very close, because I had definitely fallen for this woman. She made me feel alive again in a way I hadn't felt in years, and I didn't want that feeling to end. But, unfortunately, it had to for now. She had to return to Los Angeles to begin work on a new film, and I still had a few more tours scheduled. When the time came to take her and her friends to the airport, we were both a little on edge, trying to make sense of what had happened between us over the past week. "James," she said softly as we stood near the departure gate, "I don't know exactly what this week meant, but I felt something real for you. I'd really love for you to come with me." I looked into her eyes, feeling the same mix of emotions. "I felt it too, Tanya. Whatever it was powerful, but I can't leave just yet. I still have commitments here, but I'll come see you in Los Angeles soon. How about in 2 weeks? I'll come for a week. You can show me your place, and we'll explore the city together." She smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Sounds good, except for the waiting part." I smiled back, trying to lighten the moment. Promise me you'll wait for me, she said, stepping closer. I promise. I'll come to California, I said, gently squeezing her hand. And we'll pick up right where we left off. She laughed, and the sound made something in me feel lighter. Then she reached into her bag and handed me a small card. Here's my home number and my cell. The number printed on the front belongs to my agent, Tyrone. If you can't reach me directly, call him. He'll know where I am. I nodded, not trusting my voice in that moment. I gave her my business card in return so she would have all my contact details too. We hugged tightly, kissed goodbye, and then waved to each other as she and her friends made their way through airport security and up the ramp to board the plane. I stood there watching until their plane pulled away from the gate, disappearing into the sky. As I turned to walk back toward my daughter, I felt the weight of the moment settle in. I couldn't help but wonder, would I ever see Tanya again? But deep down, I knew the answer. I had made her a promise, and I fully intended to keep it. When I reached the terminal lobby, I spotted Maddie standing with Sarah. They were whispering conspiratorially, but quickly quieted when they saw me approaching. I smiled to myself, already feeling the gears of life turning again, but with something new stirring inside me. Spending that time with my daughter and seeing her happy again meant the world to me. I knew the problems between Caitlin and me had been affecting her, and I was just relieved she hadn't fallen into a deep sadness. She deserved joy, and I was determined to do everything I could to support her. Okay, Maddie, sweetheart, are you ready to go back to school? I asked, my voice tightening. I really enjoyed having you visit, darling. My throat caught, and I couldn't say anything more. She understood. Dad, I love you too, she said, stepping into my arms. We embraced tightly. I waved for Sarah to join us, and the three of us stood there for a long moment, holding each other close. When we finally let go, the girls looked at each other and started giggling. Dad, you're totally in love with Tanya, aren't you? Sarah asked with a teasing smile. Yes, I admitted. I think I am. You should call her tomorrow, Sarah added. Let her know you're thinking of her. Us girls love that. I nodded. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you, both of you. Thank you for coming to see me. I love you both so much. Trying to lighten the mood before they left, I grinned and asked, So, are you two going to make this official? Is Sarah going to be my daughter-in-law anytime soon? Sarah just smiled brightly while Maddie blushed and laughed. We hugged one more time, even tighter than before. I asked Maddie to promise that she would call me as soon as she landed. Then I stood and watched as they boarded their flight. That familiar ache crept back in as I watched the plane pull away from the gate and head for the runway. Once it took off, I returned to my own aircraft and began preparing it for the short flight back to the pier. Everything seemed in order. The fuel gauge showed a small reserve, enough to get me safely back. I started the engine, received clearance from the tower, and taxied to the runway. Throttle wide open, the old plane roared to life, speeding down the runway until it lifted off into the clear blue sky. That feeling of takeoff, it never gets old. The flight was smooth at first, not a cloud in sight. But then, suddenly, there was a loud bang from the nose of the aircraft. I froze. Nothing seemed to change immediately, so I let out a breath until another bang echoed through the cockpit about 10 minutes later. I quickly ran through a mental checklist, scanning all the instruments. Everything appeared normal. Then came the third bang, and this time, it shook me. I hit the dashboard in frustration, trying to keep calm. That's when one of the gauges flashed red, a sudden drop in oil pressure. That was bad. Very bad. I immediately radioed my position and called for help. I wasn't sure I could make it to the nearest airport, but I had to try. The dispatcher came back with a suggestion. There was a small island with a rough dirt strip about 10 minutes away. I turned the aircraft in that direction, scanning the horizon. Suddenly, the engine coughed. Smoke began to pour from the right side, and I felt the power drain from the plane. My heart pounded. I had logged countless hours in the sky, but never experienced an emergency like this. I pitched the nose downward slightly to maintain altitude and glide. Through the haze and my rising fear, I spotted a small island in the distance. I relayed my last known coordinates and prepared for an emergency landing. As I got closer, I realized the island was completely uninhabited, and there was no proper landing strip in sight. Just sand, trees, and a rocky shoreline. The engine jerked violently, and the plane tilted sharply. I yanked the controls, trying to stabilize the descent. If I could reach the shallow bay on the northern shore, I might have a chance. The altimeter was dropping fast, 300 feet, 200, 150. I aimed between the rocks and the waves, trying to guide the plane as steadily as possible. Then, impact. The plane slammed into the water hard. It bounced once, then crashed down again with a shuddering jolt. My head hit the dashboard, and everything went black. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a powerful story like this. And if you thought this was intense, wait until you hear what happens in the next story. Just a warning. If you're under 18, this next one isn't for you. But if you're ready, go ahead and click through.